I am Thomas, 32 years old, and I was about to drop an $18 million receipt on the table that would destroy my family's entire understanding of reality. But before I tell you about the silence that was loud enough to break glass, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. It started, as most disasters in my life did, at the Gilded Lily. It's one of those restaurants in Manhattan where the lighting is too dim, the menus don't have prices, and the waiters look like they just walked off a runway in Milan. We were there for my Grandma Evelyn's 80th birthday. It was supposed to be her night, but as usual, the gravitational pull of the room had shifted entirely to my older brother, Julian. Julian was 34, handsome in that effortless, annoying way, wearing a bespoke suit that probably cost more than my first car. He was holding court at the head of the table, swirling a glass of red wine that was older than me. Next to him sat Sarah, his fiancée, who looked exhausted, and across from him were my parents, Robert and Sylvia, looking at him with that glossy-eyed adoration that made my stomach turn. I sat at the far end of the table, next to Aunt Martha. Martha was Dad's younger sister, a no-nonsense woman who wore sensible shoes and had a gaze that could peel paint. We were the exiles of the table, separated from the VIP section by a centerpiece of orchids that was aggressively large. "So," Julian said, his voice carrying that practice boom he used to command attention. "The wedding planner says if we want the imported tulips from Holland, we need to up the budget by another 15 grand. But honestly, it's a once-in-a-lifetime event. You can't put a price tag on memories." My father, Robert, nodded solemnly, like Julian had just recited scripture. "Absolutely, son. You and Sarah deserve the best. The Hale name means something. We have standards to maintain." I took a sip of water, trying to wash down the bitterness. The Hale name meant something, all right. For Julian, it meant a blank check. For me, it meant figure it out yourself. "And the housing hunt?" my mother, Sylvia, asked, leaning forward. She was dripping in jewelry that I knew they couldn't really afford. "Did you hear back from the Monarch yet?" The table went quiet. The Monarch was the most exclusive residential tower in the city. It was the kind of place where billionaires lived, where the doorman knew your blood type, and where the views of Central Park cost a human soul. Julian cleared his throat, adjusting his silk tie. He looked a little flushed. "Well, we're still negotiating. The board is incredibly stiff. They have these archaic rules about liquidity. But I'm confident. Once they see the vision for my new consulting firm, they'll understand who they're dealing with." I saw Aunt Martha roll her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. She leaned over to me, whispering, "Consulting firm? Is that what we're calling unemployed but with a nice business card these days?" I stifled a laugh. "Be nice, Auntie. He has a vision." Julian's eyes snapped toward us. He had radar for anyone not paying him absolute homage. "Something funny, Thomas?" "Nothing," I said, keeping my face neutral. "Just admiring the orchids." Julian sneered. "I'm surprised you could make it, Tom. I know the subway ride from... where is it again? Queens? That can be unreliable on weekends." "Brooklyn," I corrected calmly. "And the train was fine, right?" "Brooklyn," Julian chuckled, looking around the table to make sure everyone got the joke. "I don't know how you do it. The noise, the smell. I need space to think, to create. That's why the Monarch is the only option for us. The penthouse unit, specifically. It's not just an apartment. It's a statement." "It's certainly a statement," I said, my voice level. "You wouldn't understand, Thomas." My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with that sweet, poisonous condescension. "Julian is building a legacy. Appearance matters in his world. We can't all be happy living in modest conditions." "Modest," I repeated. "It's fine, Mom." Julian waved a hand dismissively. "Thomas has his little computer projects. We have real-world business. Oh, by the way, Tom, did you park that rental car out front? I think I saw a dent in the bumper. You might want to check the insurance policy on that. Wouldn't want you to go bankrupt over a fender bender." My father laughed, a deep, hearty belly laugh. "Good one, son. Practical advice. I looked down at my plate. My hand was resting on my pocket, feeling the outline of the folded document inside. The paper was crisp. The ink was dry. It was the deed to the penthouse at the Monarch. I looked at Grandma Evelyn. She was watching me, her blue eyes sharp and knowing. She gave me the tiniest nod. Not yet, her eyes said. Wait for it. I took a breath. I'll keep that in mind, Julian. Thanks for the advice. Just looking out for you, little brother. Julian smirked, raising his glass. To success. Real success. To success. The family echoed. I raised my water glass. To the truth, I thought. And to the fire that's about to burn this whole table down. To understand why I was ready to publicly execute my brother's ego, you have to understand the soil this toxicity grew in. It wasn't just one dinner. It was 32 years of being the spare part to Julian's luxury vehicle. The difference in our treatment wasn't subtle. It was structural. It was built into the foundation of our house. I remember the summer I was 14. It was a scorching July in suburban Connecticut. Julian, then 16, had decided he wanted to be a leader. This meant he wanted to go to the International Future Leaders Summit in Switzerland. The cost was $5,000 for 2 weeks. I sat at the kitchen table watching my father write the check. He signed it with a flourish, tearing it out of the book like he was signing a peace treaty. This is an investment, Dad had said, handing the check to Mom to mail. Julian has executive potential. You can see it in the way he walks. He needs to rub shoulders with the elite. I had waited until the check was in the envelope before I spoke up. I had a brochure in my hand, crinkled from being held too tight. Dad, I asked, what is it, Thomas? He didn't look up from his ledger. There's a coding camp at the community college. It's day camp, so no travel costs. It's $300. I really want to learn C++. Dad stopped writing. He slowly took off his reading glasses and looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Thomas, we just spent a significant amount on Julian's trip. We need to be practical with the rest of our budget. But it's only $300. I argued, my voice cracking. We spend more than that on Julian's tennis lessons every month. That's different, Mom interjected from the sink. Tennis is a social skill, honey. It opens doors. Sitting in a dark room typing on a computer, that's not going to help you network. Besides, your brother needs a new wardrobe for Switzerland. You can't send a leader out in rags. They didn't send me to the camp. Instead, Julian got 3 bespoke suits for a 2-week camp where kids mostly drank smuggled beer and hooked up in chalets. That fall, Julian came back with a tan and a certificate of global vision. I spent the summer mowing lawns in the neighborhood. I saved up every dollar, sweating in the humidity, pushing a heavy mower until my hands blistered. With the money, I went to a garage sale down the street. A neighbor was selling an old, bulky desktop computer. It was a dinosaur even back then, but it worked. I bought it for $50. I set it up in the corner of the basement, the only place I was allowed to keep that junk, while Julian was upstairs modeling his new suits for my parents, receiving applause for simply existing. I was downstairs in the dark, bathed in the blue glow of a CRT monitor. I bought a used textbook on coding from the library sale. I taught myself how to speak the language of machines. While Julian learned how to charm people, I learned how to build systems. One evening, Mom came down to the basement to fetch a bottle of wine. She saw me typing lines of code that looked like gibberish to her. Thomas, she sighed, shaking her head, you really need to get out more. Look at your brother. He's upstairs telling us about the friends he made from Dubai and London. That's how you build a future. This, she gestured vaguely at my screen. This is just antisocial. You need to work on your image. Julian understands that image is everything. I like this, Mom, I said quietly. It makes sense to me. Logic doesn't lie. Well, logic doesn't get you invited to the country club, she snapped, grabbing the wine. Try to be a little less invisible, Thomas. She went back upstairs to the laughter and the light. I stayed in the basement. I didn't know it then, but she was right about one thing. Logic wouldn't get me into the country club. but it would eventually buy the country club. I looked at the cursor blinking on the black screen. It was a steady, rhythmic pulse. It was the only thing in that house that waited for my input. I typed a command and the machine obeyed. It didn't care about my brother. It didn't care about my clothes. It only cared if my code was clean. That night, listening to the muffled cheers for Julian through the floorboards, I made a silent vow. If they wanted me to be invisible, fine. I would disappear. I would build my own world in the dark, where they couldn't see it, couldn't touch it, and most importantly, couldn't take it away from me. The isolation of my teenage years would have been unbearable if not for one person. Grandma Evelyn. She was my father's mother, but she seemed to have skipped a generation when it came to genetics. While my father was obsessed with status, Evelyn was obsessed with substance. When I was 12, 2 years before the computer incident, we had a family gathering to celebrate Julian winning a participation trophy in a regional soccer tournament. My parents acted like he had won the World Cup. They bought a cake. They toasted with champagne. Julian sat there, soaking it in, holding a plastic trophy that cost $5 to make. I had slipped away to Grandma Evelyn's study. It was my sanctuary. It smelled of old paper and lavender. She found me there, reading one of her encyclopedias. "Not enjoying the coronation?" she asked, her voice raspy and warm. "It's just a participation trophy, Grandma," I muttered. "Everyone got one." "I know," she said, closing the door. "The world loves to celebrate noise, Thomas. But silence. Silence is where the real work happens." She walked over to her heavy oak desk and unlocked a bottom drawer. She pulled out a wooden box, the velvet lining worn with age. "Come here," she said. I approached. Inside were rows of silver coins. They weren't shiny. They were dull, some almost black with tarnish. "These," she said, picking one up, "are Mercury dimes, and these are Morgan dollars. My father started collecting them during the Depression. They don't look like much, do they?" "They look dirty," I admitted. She smiled. "That's tarnish. It happens when silver sits for a long time. But underneath, the solid silver. Real value. Your father, he likes things that sparkle. Chrome, glass, new paint. But chrome rusts. Paint chips. This," she pressed a heavy coin into my hand. "This holds its weight." I looked at the coin, felt heavy, cold, and substantial. "I want you to have this collection, Thomas," she said. My eyes widened. "But shouldn't Julian get it? He's the oldest." Grandma Evelyn laughed, a dry, sharp sound. "Julian would sell these to buy a watch that stops ticking in a year. Or he'd polish them to make them shiny and ruin their numismatic value. You appreciate things as they are. You understand that value isn't always visible." She gripped my shoulder. "Listen to me closely. Some treasures grow quietly in the dark. Not everything of value needs to shine brightest at first glance. Let them overlook you. It's a superpower. When they don't see you coming, they can't stop you." That box of coins became my first secret. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Julian. I took them to my room and I studied them. I went to the library and looked up their values. I learned about grading, about mint marks, about the fluctuations of the silver market. That was the spark. I realized that there was an entire economy operating beneath the surface of the visible world. While my parents focused on salaries and cars, depreciating assets, I became obsessed with appreciation. By the time I was 15, I was selling some of the lesser duplicates from the collection online. I didn't spend the money on clothes or games. I reinvested it. I bought underpriced collectibles from eBay, vintage comics, rare stamps, misprinted baseball cards, and flipped them for a profit. I remember sitting at dinner one night. Julian was bragging about a new pair of sneakers that cost $200. "They have air pumps in the heels," he said, putting his foot on the chair to show them off. "Very sharp, son," Dad said. "You look like a professional athlete." I ate my peas silently. That afternoon, I had closed a deal on a rare 1918 stamp that netted me $400 in profit. I had more money in my hidden PayPal account than Julian had in his entire life savings, but I was wearing a shirt from Walmart with a fraying collar. Thomas, Mom said, looking at my shirt. You really need to take better care of your clothes. You look like a vagrant. Sorry, Mom, I said. Why can't you be more like your brother? She sighed. He takes pride in his appearance. I looked at Julian. He was preening. He had no idea that the vagrant across the table was already out-earning him. Grandma Evelyn caught my eye from across the table. She didn't smile, but she tapped her finger against the table. A slow, rhythmic beat. Value in the dark. That night, I didn't feel bad about my shirt. I felt powerful. I had a secret engine, a machine that generated freedom, and they didn't even know it existed. They thought I was falling behind, but I was just playing a different game entirely. A game they didn't even know the rules to. High school ended, and the divide between us widened into a canyon. Julian was accepted into Bradford College, a private liberal arts school that cost $65,000 a year. His grades were mediocre. A solid C average, but Dad called in favors, donated to the alumni fund, and wrote a letter about Julian's intangible leadership qualities. When the acceptance letter came, we threw a party. Dad bought a keg of beer. To the future CEO, Dad toasted. I, on the other hand, had a 4.0 GPA. I applied to the state university because it had one of the best computer science programs in the country. It was practical, rigorous, and a fraction of the cost. I got a partial scholarship. State. Mom had sniffed when I showed her the acceptance letter. Well, I suppose it's economical. Just don't expect the same networking opportunities your brother will have. I'm going there to learn to code, Mom. Not to drink with senators' sons, I said. And that's exactly your problem, Thomas, she replied. College life was a grind. While Julian's Instagram was a montage of frat parties, ski trips to Aspen, and spring breaks in Cancun, all funded by allowance checks from Dad. I was working 3 jobs. I was a TA for the Intro to Python class, I fixed laptops at the campus IT desk, and I did freelance coding at night. I lived in a dorm room the size of a shoebox. I ate instant noodles so often my sweat smelled like sodium. But I was building something. In my junior year, I entered the State FinTech Innovation Challenge. It was a massive competition. The goal was to build an algorithm that could predict microtrends in volatile markets. I spent 4 months sleeping 3 hours a night. I coded until my eyes burned. I skipped meals. I skipped parties. I poured everything I had learned from Grandma's coin collection, the understanding of hidden value, into lines of code. I won. First place. A trophy, a real one, heavy glass, and a check for $5,000. The awards ceremony was on a Friday night. I had called my parents 2 weeks in advance. It's a big deal, Dad, I had said on the phone. The governor is going to be there. I'm presenting my work. We'll try, Thomas, Dad had said distractedly. But Julian is coming home that weekend. He's been under a lot of stress with his fraternity initiation. The night of the ceremony came. I stood on the stage, the lights blinding me, holding my trophy. I scanned the audience. I looked for my mother's blonde hair. I looked for my father's broad shoulders. I saw rows of strangers, parents hugging their kids, professors shaking hands. My family wasn't there. I found out later why. Julian had been arrested that night. DUI. He had smashed his new Audi, a 21st birthday gift, into a parked car while high on something that wasn't just alcohol. My parents spent that night at the police station, calling lawyers, paying bail, and calling the local paper to kill the story. They spent $15,000 that night to keep Julian's record clean. They didn't even text me. I stood in the lobby of the auditorium, the trophy heavy in my hands, feeling a coldness spreading through my chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. Sadness implies you expected something different. This was just confirmation. I was alone. I walked out to the parking lot, put the trophy in the trunk of my beat-up Honda Civic, and sat in the driver's seat. I didn't cry. I just gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Okay, I said to the empty car. Okay. That was the moment I stopped looking for their validation. I realized that no matter what I achieved, Julian's failures would always take precedence over my successes. His disasters were more important than my triumphs. I started the engine. The car rattled. "I don't need them," I whispered. "I'll build a family of my own. A family of zeros and ones." But as I was about to pull out, a knock came on my window. I rolled it down. A man was standing there. He was older, maybe 60, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my tuition. He had silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything. "Thomas Hale?" he asked. "Yes. I saw your presentation," he said. "The predictive volatility model. You factored in sentiment analysis from social media feeds. That was elegant." "Thank you," I said, wary. He extended a hand through the window. "I'm Marcus Sterling. Sterling Capital. I think you and I need to have a conversation." I shook his hand. It was firm. "I noticed," Marcus said, looking around the empty parking lot, "that you didn't have anyone taking pictures of you tonight." I looked away. "They had a conflict." Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't offer pity. He offered something better. Respect. "Their loss," he said. "Hungry? I know a diner that makes a terrible coffee but excellent pie. Let's talk about your algorithm." That night, over cherry pie and burnt coffee, I didn't just find a mentor. I found the father figure I had never had. Marcus Sterling was a legend in the investment world, but you wouldn't know it by looking at him. He drove a 10-year-old Volvo and wore a Casio watch. "Wealth screams," he told me once, "but wealth whispers." He offered me a job right there in the diner. Not an internship, a junior analyst position at his boutique firm. The starting salary was decent, but the real value was the access. He gave me a key to the office and told me I could use the Bloomberg terminals whenever I wanted. "You have a mind for patterns, Thomas," Marcus told me a few months later. We were in his office, looking at a chaotic spread of market data. "You see the noise, but you listen for the signal. Most people just follow the herd." "My brother is the herd," I said, staring at the screen. Marcus chuckled. "Family is the first market we learn to trade in. And it sounds like your stock is undervalued at home." "It's delisted," I corrected. "Good," Marcus said, leaning back. "That means they won't be looking over your shoulder while you build your empire. Independence is a gift, Thomas, even if it's wrapped in neglect. My father left when I was 6. Best thing he ever did for me. Taught me that nobody was coming to save me. Under Marcus's wing, I thrived. I graduated college with honors. Another ceremony my parents missed because Julian was having a mental health crisis, which turned out to be a breakup with a sorority girl, and went full-time at Sterling Capital. But I wanted more. I wanted to build something of my own. I told Marcus about my idea for Aegis Analytics. I wanted to create an AI-driven platform that democratized hedge fund-level data for mid-tier investors. Marcus didn't try to keep me as an employee. He wrote me a check. "Seed money," he said, handing me $50,000 of his own money. "I want 10% equity, and I want you to call me every Sunday to tell me I'm going to be rich." "You're already rich, Marcus." "I want to be richer," he winked. "Go build it, kid." While I was building Aegis, my family life continued its predictable dysfunction. Julian graduated college after 6 years. Dad immediately hired him at his construction supply company. They created a title for him, Director of Strategic Innovation. I came home for Thanksgiving that year. Julian was wearing a Rolex. "It was a graduation gift," Mom beamed, petting Julian's arm. "He's working so hard at the company. He's revolutionizing the logistics department." I looked at Dad. He looked tired. The construction industry was slowing down and margins were thin. "How are logistics, Julian?" I asked. "Complex," Julian said, taking a massive bite of turkey. "We're thinking of rebranding. New logo. New website. The image is too industrial. We need to be sleeker." "We sell drywall and lumber, son," Dad said gently. "Industrial is the business." "That's small thinking, Dad," Julian countered. "We need to sell the lifestyle of building." I almost choked on my stuffing. Selling the lifestyle of drywall? "And how about you, Thomas?" Mom asked, her tone shifting to that pitying voice. "Still working for that Mr. Sterling. Actually, I started my own company, I said. Aegis Analytics. Oh, Mom said, her face falling. A startup. That sounds risky. Do you have health insurance? I bought a plan, I said. Well, Dad sighed. If it doesn't work out, maybe we can find a place for you in the warehouse. Julian could probably use an assistant to help with the rebranding. Julian laughed. Yeah, Tom. I could use someone to fetch coffee while I strategize. I gripped my fork. The metal dug into my palm. I think I'm okay, thanks, I said. Don't be too proud, Mom warned. Pride comes before a fall. You don't have Julian's business instinct. I looked at Marcus's check in my mind. I looked at the code running on my servers back in my apartment. We'll see, I said. I left early that Thanksgiving. I drove back to my shitty apartment, turned on my servers, and worked until the sun came up. I wasn't doing it for the money anymore. I was doing it to prove that business instinct wasn't about wearing a Rolex. It was about knowing what time it actually was. And for my family, time was running out. They just didn't know it yet. The first 2 years of Aegis Analytics were the hardest of my life. I wasn't a billionaire yet. I wasn't even making a salary. Every dollar of revenue went back into the servers, the data licenses, and paying my one employee, a brilliant coder named Elena who I poached from Google. I lived in a basement apartment in Brooklyn that smelled permanently of damp concrete. My furniture consisted of a mattress on the floor and a desk made of 2 sawhorses and an old door. I ate instant ramen enhanced with frozen vegetables because it cost 40 cents a meal. In contrast, Julian's life was a masterclass in failing upward. Since he was the director of strategic innovation, he convinced Dad that he needed an office in the city to meet with high-level clients. Dad rented a space in Midtown Manhattan, $8,000 a month. Julian filled it with leather couches, a stocked bar, and a foosball table. I visited him once. I walked in, wearing my hoodie and jeans, carrying a backpack with my laptop. Julian was playing FIFA on a massive TV with 2 of his buddies. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Thomas, Julian yelled, not looking away from the screen. Grab a beer from the fridge. We're brainstorming. Brainstorming FIFA strategies? I asked, looking around the empty office. There wasn't a single file or blueprint in sight. It's about team building, Julian said. You wouldn't get it. Startups are all about grind, right? Corporate leadership is about culture. My parents came to visit me in Brooklyn a few months later. They parked Dad's Lincoln Town car in front of my building, looking terrified that the wheels would be stolen. They walked down the narrow stairs to my basement unit. Mom held a handkerchief to her nose. Oh, Thomas, she whispered, looking at the water stains on the ceiling. This is squalid. It's low overhead, Mom, I said. It allows me to scale the business. But surely you can afford a bed frame? Dad asked, kicking the corner of my mattress. This looks like a drug den. I put every cent into the algorithm, I explained. We're close to a breakthrough. Once the beta launches, the revenue will follow. Mom sat on the edge of my desk, careful not to touch anything. Honey, listen to us. There's no shame in admitting defeat. Julian is doing so well. He just landed a meeting with a major developer. He did? I asked. Well, he's planning the meeting, Dad corrected. He needs a new car to impress them, though. The Audi is a bit youthful. We're thinking of leasing him a Porsche Cayenne. It screams stability. I almost laughed. Porsche for stability. Dad, I said, trying to be serious. How is the company finances? Can you afford a Porsche lease right now? Dad stiffened. The business is fine, Thomas. We have ups and downs. But you have to spend money to make money. That's something you're clearly not understanding. He gestured around my room. You're living like a rat because you're afraid to invest in yourself. I am investing in myself, I said firmly. I'm just not investing in appearances. Appearance is reality, Mom said, standing up. I can't stay here. The air is damp. It's bad for my sinuses. Thomas, please just call Julian. Ask him for a job. He loves you. He'd help you. They left after 20 minutes. They didn't ask about my code. They didn't ask about my client list, which was slowly growing. They just saw the basement and assumed failure. That night, I sat on my mattress, staring at the ceiling. I felt small. I felt dirty. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was deluding myself. I was 26, living like a troll, while my brother was driving a Porsche. Then my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. Just saw the beta metrics. The text read, "Customer retention is at 98%. The churn is 0. You're sitting on a gold mine, kid. Don't sell early." I breathed out. Marcus saw the numbers. My parents saw the furniture. I texted back, "Not selling. Doubling down." I got up, made another bowl of ramen, and went back to work. I coded with a ferocity that scared me. I wasn't just building a product anymore. I was building a fortress. And the higher the walls went, the less I could hear their voices telling me I was nothing. But the real test was coming. The moment that would nearly break me, and then forge me into something unbreakable. It happened 6 months later. Aegis was growing, but we hit a snag. A major data provider changed their API pricing model overnight, demanding an upfront payment of $50,000 to continue service. If we didn't pay in 48 hours, our platform would go dark. Our clients would leave. The company would die. I had $12,000 in the bank. I was waiting on a huge invoice from a client, but it wouldn't clear for another week. It was a classic cash flow crunch. I was desperate. I couldn't ask Marcus. He was in silent retreat in Bali and unreachable. I had no choice. I called my father. "Dad, I need a loan," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Short term, 50,000. I can pay you back in 10 days with interest. I have the invoice to prove the incoming funds." Dad sighed heavily on the other end. 50,000? "Thomas, that's a lot of money." "It's for the business, Dad. It's a bridge loan. If I don't pay this vendor, I lose everything I've worked for over the last 3 years." "I don't know, son," he said, his voice dripping with that fake financial wisdom. "The construction market is very soft right now. Liquidity is tight. And honestly, throwing good money after bad. If your business is so fragile that one bill can kill it, maybe it's not a viable business." "It is viable," I shouted, losing my cool. "I have clients. I have revenue. I just need a bridge. Please, Dad. You bought Julian a Porsche 3 months ago. The down payment alone was 20 grand. That was a business expense," Dad snapped. "That car represents the company. Your little software thing. It's intangible. I'm sorry, Thomas. I just don't have the cash lying around. You'll have to figure it out. That's how you learn." He hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. Tight liquidity. No cash. I almost believed him. Until the next morning. I was scrolling through Facebook, trying to distract myself from the impending doom of my company, when I saw Mom's post. A photo of Julian standing in the driveway. A giant red bow was on the hood of a brand new, cherry red boat. A speedboat. The caption read, "Surprise for our hard-working executive. Julian has been so stressed lately, we thought he needed some time on the water to recharge. Welcome to the SS Hale." I zoomed in on the boat. It was a Sea Ray, at least $60,000. My hands shook. Dad didn't have $50,000 to save my life's work. A loan I would have paid back in a week. But he had $60,000 cash to buy a toy for Julian because he was stressed. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was a quiet, cold fracture. The last tether of loyalty I had to them was severed. I deleted the Facebook app. I had 24 hours left. I looked at my accounts. I had $12,000. It wasn't enough to pay the vendor. I did something reckless. Something Marcus would have killed me for. I took the $12,000, my entire personal and business savings, and I logged into a high-risk options trading account. I had been tracking a volatile biotech stock, Virogen. My algorithm, the one Dad called intangible, had flagged a massive accumulation pattern that morning. The news hadn't hit the wire yet, but the math said something big was coming. It was a 99% probability of success according to my code. But there was that 1% chance I would lose everything. I stared at the buy calls button. That's how you learn, Dad had said. Watch me learn. I whispered. I bet it all. Every cent leveraged to the hilt. I didn't sleep. I watched the ticker. At 8:30 a.m. the next day, Virogen announced FDA approval for a breakthrough cancer drug. The stock didn't just go up. It went vertical. My $12,000 position exploded. It doubled. Tripled. By 10 a.m., it was up 4,000%. I sold. The balance in my account settled at $492,000. I paid the vendor $50,000. I stared at the remaining $442,000. I didn't call Dad. I didn't call Mom. I didn't post it on Facebook. I realized then that the tight liquidity was a lie. Their love was the only thing with tight liquidity, and they had spent it all on Julian. I took a breath. I was safe. And more importantly, I was dangerous now, because I had capital and I had no emotional debt left to pay. That $500,000 was the fuel Aegis needed. I didn't buy a boat. I hired 3 more developers. I upgraded our servers. I launched the premium version of the platform. Within 18 months, Aegis was generating $2 million in monthly recurring revenue. Then came the acquisition offer. A major bank wanted our tech. They offered $45 million. I sat down with Marcus, who was back from Bali and very happy with his 10% stake. Do you want to sell? Marcus asked. No, I said. I want to acquire. Attaboy, Marcus grinned. Instead of selling, I leveraged the company's valuation to buy out a competitor, the very data company that had threatened to cut me off. I bought them. I fired the manager who had refused my extension request, and I integrated their data into Aegis. My personal net worth crossed the $50 million mark shortly after my 30th birthday. I moved out of the basement. I didn't move to the Monarch yet. I moved to a nice, secure luxury building in Brooklyn. It had a doorman and a gym, but it was understated. I drove a Volvo just like Marcus. I kept it all a secret. To my family, I was still getting by. When I visited home, I wore simple clothes. I let them pay for dinner, which they did with a heavy sigh and a lecture about charity. Why? Because I knew them. If they knew I had $50 million, Julian would suddenly have a vision for a hedge fund that needed funding. Dad would need a bailout for his crumbling supply company. Mom would want a vacation home in the Hamptons. They would drain me dry, not out of malice, but out of entitlement. They believed family assets belonged to the family, which really meant Julian. So I played the role. I was the struggling tech guy. How's the little computer business? Julian would ask at Christmas, swirling his scotch. It keeps the lights on, I'd say, sipping water. That's good, he'd patronize me. We had a rough year. The boat needed a new engine. Cost a fortune. But hey, you gotta pay to play, right? Right? I'd say. I watched them struggling. Dad's business was actually failing. I could see the signs, the deferred maintenance on the house, the fact that Mom stopped shopping at Neiman Marcus and started shopping at outlets, but hiding the bags. They were bleeding money to keep up the facade of Julian's success. It was tragic. But I didn't intervene. Not yet. I was waiting for the moment where saving them wouldn't just be a handout, but a lesson. I just didn't expect that lesson to involve Grandma Evelyn. 3 weeks before the birthday dinner at the Gilded Lily, Grandma Evelyn collapsed. Heart failure. I was in a board meeting when I got the call. I didn't hesitate. Cancel everything, I told Elena, my CO. I'm going to Connecticut. I drove my Volvo to the hospital. I arrived to find my parents in the waiting room, looking more annoyed than devastated. It's her heart, Dad said, checking his watch. Doctors say it's serious. But you know Mother. She's stubborn. Where's Julian? I asked. He's on his way, Mom said defensively. He had a very important fitting for his wedding tuxedo. He can't just drop everything, Thomas. I walked past them into the ICU. Grandma looked small in the bed, hooked up to monitors. Her silver hair was spread on the pillow. I pulled a chair up and sat. I held her hand. It was frail, the skin like parchment paper. I stayed there for 3 days. I worked from my laptop in the corner of the room, running an empire worth millions while my family popped in for 10 minutes at a time. Julian finally showed up on the second day. He was wearing a tracksuit. He walked in, kissed Grandma on the forehead, and then took a selfie holding her hand. "Keep fighting, Grandma. Hashtag family first," he muttered as he typed the caption on Instagram. "I gotta run," he told me after 5 minutes. "Meeting the florist." "You good here, Tom? You don't have a job to get back to, right?" "I'm good," I said, my voice cold. After he left, Grandma opened her eyes. She pulled her oxygen mask down. "Did he get the lighting right?" she rasped. I chuckled, squeezing her hand. "I think he used a filter." She turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were clear. "Stop it, Thomas," she whispered. "Stop what?" "Stop pretending to be small. It doesn't suit you." I froze. "Grandma, I don't know what." "The Wall Street Journal," she interrupted. 6 months ago. The invisible unicorn. How Aegis Analytics is rewriting the fintech rules. No photo of the CEO, but they named him. Thomas Hale. She reached under her mattress. She was hiding things even in the ICU, and pulled out a crumpled clipping of the article. "I read it," she said, smiling weakly. "I read it every day. You did it, Tommy. You really did it." Tears pricked my eyes. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you weren't ready to tell them," she said. "And I respect a secret. But Thomas, look at me." I looked at her. "I'm dying," she said plainly. "And I don't want to leave this world knowing my grandson is hiding in the shadows because he's afraid of outshining a flashlight." "I'm not afraid," I said. I don't want the drama. I don't want them coming for the money." "They will always come for something," she said. "But you need to live your truth. Not for their validation, but for your own peace. You bought the penthouse, didn't you?" My jaw dropped. "How did you?" "I have ears," she winked. "My bridge partner's son is a broker at Douglas Elliman. He mentioned a Thomas Hale buying the unit my grandson Julian wouldn't shut up about. It was poetic justice." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "My 80th birthday dinner," she said. "Promise me, no more hiding. Burn the house down, Thomas. Let the truth stand in the ashes." "Grandma, that could destroy the family." "The family is already destroyed," she said. "It's built on lies. You're just going to clear the rubble so something real can grow. Promise me." I looked at the woman who gave me the coins. The woman who taught me value. "I promise," I said. Grandma stabilized enough to be discharged a week later, insisting she would make it to her birthday dinner. "I'm not missing the show," she told me. I went back to the city, but I kept my promise. I started preparing. The first step was finalizing the penthouse deal. I had been eyeing the unit at the Monarch for investment purposes. But after Julian's bragging, it became personal. I called my broker. "The penthouse A unit," I said. "I want to close. Cash. Expedited." "Mr. Hale," the broker said. "We have another interested party." "Julian Hale? Relation?" "My brother," I said. "Ah, well, to be honest, his application was rejected. Insufficient income verification and his guarantors, his parents, didn't pass the liquidity stress test. But he's insisting he can find co-signers." "He won't," I said. "Send me the papers." That afternoon, I decided to do some due diligence on my parents' financial situation. If they were trying to guarantee an $18 million apartment, they must be desperate. I used my own company's software. It's amazing what public records and credit headers can tell you. What I found made my blood run cold. My father hadn't just had a slow year. He was drowning. The business was technically insolvent. And worse, I saw a pending application for a second mortgage on their house. The house my grandfather built. The house Grandma Evelyn lived in. They were mortgaging the family home to pay for Julian's wedding and to try and secure the lease for him. They were willing to risk Grandma's roof to buy Julian a party. I stared at the screen, a mixture of rage and sorrow washing over me. This was the practicality Dad always preached about? Risking homelessness for a wedding reception? I printed the documents. I folded them and put them in my jacket pocket, right next to the deed for the penthouse. The stage was set. I had the evidence. I had the asset. And thanks to Grandma, I had the permission. We are back at the Gilded Lily. The appetizers have been cleared. The wine has been poured. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. Julian was still talking about the monarch. He just wouldn't let it go. It was his white whale. The thing is, Julian said, sawing into his filet mignon, the monarch needs young blood. I told the board, you have a building full of dinosaurs. You need influencers. You need vitality. I think they heard me. I'm sure they did, sweetheart, Mom said, glaring at a waiter who was too slow refilling her water. They'd be lucky to have you. Aunt Martha checked her phone again. I nudged her under the table. She gave me a tiny smirk. She knew. I had briefed her and Grandma beforehand. Grandma was sitting at the head of the table, looking frail, but her eyes were dancing. She was waiting for the fireworks. So, Thomas, Dad turned to me, his face red from the wine. Julian tells me you're still driving that rental car? Or did you buy a used one? It's a rental, I said. I haven't decided on a car yet. You know, Julian interjected, his mouth full of steak. I could get you a deal at the Audi dealership. My guy owes me a favor. Maybe get you into a certified pre-owned A4? It's a good entry-level luxury car. Might help you with whatever it is you do. I don't think I need an Audi, Julian, I said. Suit yourself, he shrugged. Just trying to help you level up. You know, Mom and Dad worry. You're 32 and you're essentially stagnant. Stagnant? I asked. Yeah, no assets, no real career, no wife. You're just kind of floating. It's embarrassing for them, honestly. People ask what the Hale boys are doing, and they have to say Julian is taking over Manhattan and Thomas is figuring it out. Mom nodded sadly. It's true, Thomas. We just want you to have what Julian has. Ambition. I put my fork down. The metal clinked against the china. The sound silenced the table. Ambition, I repeated. Is that what we call it? Is mortgaging Grandma's house to pay for a wedding ambition? The color drained from Dad's face. What did you say? I know about the second mortgage, Dad, I said, my voice steady. I know the business is insolvent. I know you're drowning in debt to fund Julian's lifestyle. That is private family business. Dad roared, slamming his hand on the table. I am family, I shot back. And Grandma lives in that house. You're gambling with her shelter so Julian can have imported tulips. You don't know what you're talking about, Julian sneered. Dad is just leveraging assets. It's high-level finance. You wouldn't understand. High-level finance. I laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. Is that what you call getting rejected by the monarch because your credit score is lower than your IQ? Julian stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. Shut your mouth. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous. I am getting that penthouse. They're just reviewing the paperwork. They aren't reviewing anything, Julian, I said, standing up slowly. The unit is off the market. Liar, Julian shouted. My broker said it's still pending. It was pending, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. Until this morning. I pulled out the deed. I tossed it onto the center of the table, right on top of the orchids. It's sold, I said. Julian snatched the paper. He read it. His eyes bulged. He looked at me, then back at the paper. Thomas Hale, he whispered. This says you bought it. Cash, I added. $18.5 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My father dropped his fork. It hit the plate with a harsh clang that made everyone flinch. 18 million? Dad stammered. Thomas? How? Did you steal it? Is this illegal? It's funny, I said, leaning forward. You assume I'm a criminal before you assume I'm successful. No, Dad, I didn't steal it. I earned it. Remember that little computer thing? It's called Aegis Analytics, and it's worth $200 million. That's impossible, Mom whispered, clutching her pearls. You live in a basement. I lived in a basement so I could build a future, I said. While you were buying Julian boats, I was building equity. Julian threw the deed back at me. This is fake. He's lying. He printed this off the internet. Look at him. He's wearing a cheap suit. Actually, Aunt Martha spoke up for the first time. Her voice was calm and deadly. She held up her phone. It's a bespoke chiton suit, Julian. Costs more than your car. And if you don't believe the paper, maybe you'll believe Fortune magazine. She turned the phone around. On the screen was the article Grandma had told me about. The headline read, "The Invisible Billionaire. How Thomas Hale Built a FinTech Empire from a Brooklyn Basement. Net worth," Martha read aloud, savoring every syllable, "estimated at over $250 million. Julian looked at the phone. He looked at me. His face crumbled. It wasn't just shock. It was the destruction of his entire worldview. He realized in that second that he wasn't the prince. He was the jester. You. Julian pointed a shaking finger at me. You knew. You knew this whole time and you let us. You let me. I let you what? I asked. I let you brag? I let you insult me? Yes, I did. Because I wanted to see if you were capable of treating me with respect without knowing my bank balance. You failed. You selfish prick. Julian screamed, lunging across the table. You have all this money and you let Dad struggle? You let me You let me worry about rent. I asked for a loan once, I said, my voice cutting through his screaming. $50,000. To save my company. Dad told me he didn't have it. The next day he bought you a boat. I looked at Dad. He was gray. He couldn't meet my eyes. That was the moment, I said to Dad. That was the moment you chose. You chose the boat. You chose the image. You bought your favorite son a toy, and you left me to die. Well, I didn't die, Dad. I won. Thomas. Mom started to cry, reaching for my hand. We didn't know. If we had known. That's the problem, Mom. I pulled my hand away. If you had known, you would have loved me. You only love success. You don't love me. Sarah, Julian's fiancée, stood up. She was looking at Julian with a look of pure disgust. You told me you were rich, she said to Julian. You told me you were buying the penthouse. I will. Baby, he's lying, we can fix this. Julian stammered, grabbing her arm. She shook him off. You're a fraud, Julian. And your parents are broke? I'm done. She took off her engagement ring. A ring I now suspected was bought on credit, and dropped it into Julian's wine glass. Plink. She walked out. Julian looked at the ring sinking in the wine. He looked at me with pure hatred. You ruined everything, he shrieked. Are you happy? You ruined my life. I didn't ruin your life, Julian, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. If your life looks like a mess, that's because it always was. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for being patient with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me by liking this video and commenting 1 below, so I know you've journeyed with me to this point. This not only helps more people find this story, but it lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The restaurant was silent. Other diners were staring. The waiter holding the dessert tray looked like he wanted to vanish. Grandma Evelyn cleared her throat. Well, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. I believe I ordered the tiramisu, and since my grandson Thomas is paying, and he can certainly afford it, I'd like it to go. She stood up, shaky but dignified. Martha, Thomas, let's go. I think the air in here has become quite stale. Grandma, wait, Julian pleaded. You can't go with him. He's manipulated you. He's the only honest man at this table, Grandma snapped. Happy birthday to me. I walked over and offered Grandma my arm. Aunt Martha grabbed her purse. We walked out of the private dining room, leaving my parents and Julian sitting in the wreckage of their lies. Outside, the air was crisp, My rental car, the one with the dent, was waiting. "We're not taking that," I said. I called a car. A black SUV pulled up. Not a limo, just a clean, professional car service. "Take us to the Monarch," I told the driver. "The Monarch?" Aunt Martha asked. "We're going there now?" "It's fully furnished," I said. "I bought the model unit. It's better than the hotel." That night, we sat on the terrace of the penthouse, overlooking the glittering skyline of Manhattan. Grandma sat in a plush armchair, wrapped in a cashmere blanket I found in the closet. "It's a nice view," she said, looking at the city. "Better than the view from your basement." "Much better," I agreed. My phone blew up all night. 30 missed calls from Mom, 20 from Dad. A string of abusive texts from Julian ranging from threats to begging for money. I turned my phone off. "So," Aunt Martha said, sipping a tea, "what happens now?" "Now," I said, "I pay off the mortgage on Grandma's house so she doesn't lose it, but the title goes in my name. Dad and Mom can live there, but they answer to me." "And Julian?" Grandma asked. "Julian is on his own," I said. "For the first time in his life." Grandma nodded. "Good. Sink or swim." The next morning, I woke up in a bed that cost more than my college tuition. I walked out to the living room. Grandma was asleep in the chair. She looked peaceful. She never woke up. She passed away in her sleep that night, in the penthouse she encouraged me to buy, after seeing her invisible grandson finally be seen. Her funeral was 3 days later. It was the hardest day of my life, but also the most clarifying. My parents and Julian were there. They looked like ghosts. The swagger was gone. Julian looked disheveled. He hadn't shaved. Dad looked 10 years older. They tried to approach me at the graveside. "Thomas," Dad said, his voice trembling. "About Mother's house. The bank called." "I handled it," I said, not looking at him. "The mortgage is paid. The house is safe." "You're welcome." "Thank you," he choked out. "And about us. Can we talk?" "Not today," I said. "Today is for Grandma." I walked away. I didn't offer them a ride. I got into my car and drove back to the city. I needed time. I needed to mourn the only person who saw me when I was in the dark. For a month, I went no contact. I blocked Julian. I sent my parents' calls to voicemail. I focused on Aegis. I focused on furnishing the penthouse properly. I focused on healing. But I knew I couldn't ignore them forever. I owned the house they lived in. And despite everything, I didn't want to be cruel. I just wanted justice. I received a letter from Julian. Not a text, a handwritten letter. "Thomas," it read. "I'm broke. Sarah sued me for the deposit on the venue. Dad fired me because he can't afford my salary anymore. I'm sleeping on a friend's couch in Queens. I know I was a jerk. I know I don't deserve it. But I need help. Real help. Not money. I need to know how you did it." It was the first humble thing he had ever said. Then Dad called. He left a voicemail. "Thomas, it's Dad. I'm retiring. I'm closing the business. It's over. I just wanted you to know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I listened to the message 3 times. I realized that by winning, I had forced them to face reality. The illusion was gone. They had hit rock bottom. I called Dad back. "Meet me at the diner," I said. "The one where I met Marcus." The diner hadn't changed. It still smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease. Dad was sitting in a booth. He looked small. The bluster, the master of the universe persona, was gone. He was just an old man in a frayed polo shirt. I sat down. "You look tired, Dad," I said. "I am tired," he admitted. "I've been tired for 10 years, Thomas, trying to keep up appearances. It's exhausting. The mortgage, the cars, the club memberships. We couldn't afford any of it. But I couldn't stop. I thought, if we looked successful, we would be successful." "That's not how it works," I said gently. "I know that now," he sighed. "You proved that." He looked at me, tears forming in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked. "Why did you let us treat you like a failure when you were this?" Because if I told you, I said, you wouldn't have been proud of me. You would have been proud of the money. And you would have given it to Julian. Dad flinched. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He nodded slowly. You're right, he whispered. God help me, you're right. I would have. He reached across the table. I failed you, son. I saw Julian as a reflection of who I wanted to be. Charming, popular. And I saw you as, I don't know. You were quiet. You were intense. You scared me a little. You reminded me of the parts of myself I didn't understand. I was just working, Dad. I know. And I'm sorry. I can't undo it. But I want you to know. I am proud. Not of the money, but of the man you are. You saved Grandma's house. You didn't have to do that. She was the only one who believed in me, I said. I know, Dad said. She was always smarter than me. I took a breath. Here's the deal, Dad. I'm setting up a trust. It will pay the taxes and maintenance on the house. You and Mom get a modest monthly stipend, enough to live comfortably, but not enough for Porsches or country clubs. You retire. You enjoy your life, but the checkbook is closed. That's more than fair, he said. And Julian, I added. He gets nothing. Dad nodded. He needs to learn. Exactly. I met Julian a week later. I didn't invite him to the penthouse. We met in a park in Queens. He looked rough. He had lost weight. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, no bespoke suit in sight. Thanks for meeting me, he said, staring at his sneakers. You said you wanted to know how I did it, I said. Yeah, he laughed bitterly. I always thought you were just weird, locked in the basement. I didn't know you were building a rocket ship. I wasn't building a rocket ship, I said. I was building a life raft, because I knew this ship was going down. Julian looked at me. I hated you, you know, growing up. You were so sufficient. You didn't need anyone. I needed everyone to like me. I needed Mom to praise me. I needed Dad to fund me. I felt like a balloon. If they stopped blowing hot air into me, I'd just shrivel. And now I've popped, he said. I have nothing. No fiancé, no job, no money, no status. You have yourself, I said. That's what Grandma tried to tell you. Yeah. He wiped his nose. So, are you going to give me a job? Make me a janitor at your company to humiliate me? No, I said. I'm not giving you a job, and I'm not giving you money. Julian's shoulders slumped. Right? I figured. But, I said, handing him a card. I spoke to Marcus. He knows a guy who runs a logistics company in Jersey. Entry level. Hard work. Loading docks. But if you show up, shut up, and work, you can move up. Julian took the card. Loading docks. It's honest work, Julian. Pays a salary. You rent a small apartment. You pay your own bills. You build your own value. Just like the coins. The coins. Grandma's coins. She gave them to me because she knew I wouldn't polish them. Don't polish yourself, Julian. Just be real. He looked at the card for a long time. Then he looked at me. Thomas, he said. I'm sorry. For the rental car comments. For everything. I know, I said. Good luck, Julian. I walked away. I didn't look back. It's been a year since that dinner. Things are different now. Not perfect, but real. Dad and Mom are living quietly. Mom joined a gardening club, a cheap hobby. She seems happier, actually. Less anxious about impressing people who don't care about her. Julian took the job on the docks. He hated it for the first 3 months. He almost quit. But he stayed. He got promoted to shift supervisor last week. He drives a used Ford Focus. He pays for it himself. We text occasionally. We're not best friends, but we're brothers again. And me? I'm still at Aegis. I'm still working. But I sold the penthouse. It was too big, too flashy. Felt like I bought it to prove a point, not to live in. I bought a nice brownstone in Brooklyn. It has a basement. But this time, the basement is a wine cellar, and the door is always open. I kept Grandma's coin collection. It sits on my desk, right next to the picture of her. Sometimes, when the market is volatile and the world feels loud, I open the box. I pick up a tarnished mercury dime. I feel the weight of it. I remember that value isn't about the shine. It's about the substance. It's about the quiet work you do in the dark when no one is watching. My family finally sees me now. But more importantly, I see them. I see them as flawed, broken people who did the best they could with their limited understanding of the world. I've forgiven them, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. So, if you're out there, feeling invisible, feeling like the world is celebrating the loud and the shiny while you grind in the shadows, keep going. Build your fortress.